Hi, I'm Dan, this is At Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and this is the new Moto Guzzi V7 Sport, which joins the rest of the V7 range, but brings with it some upgrades, including improvements to the suspension and brakes, and some new electronics. It also introduces this rather fancy Verde Legnano paint, which looks very nice, doesn't it? Now this joins the rest of the V7 lineup alongside the regular Stone and the more retro-looking Special with its wire wheels and kind of trad paint schemes. But it goes for a slightly more contemporary look thanks to these upside-down forks, the twin front brakes, TFT screens, some extra electronics and things like that. It costs from £9,700, which is inevitably a bit of a hike over the rest of the V7 range. In that context, it's perhaps a bit of a shame that it sticks with the same engine as the rest of the V7. So that means it's got the 853cc shaft-driven air-cooled V-twin with 67 horsepower and 79 newton meters of torque, as opposed to the 80 horsepower and 83 newton meters you get on the V85 TT, which uses a version of the same engine upgraded with variable valve timing and a few other tweaks. In that sense, perhaps a bit of a missed opportunity for Moto Guzzi there, given they've given the bike the suspension and the brakes to cope with some extra performance, but then maybe the money ran out and they decided that in order to hit the price point against the rivals, they just needed to keep it throttled back a little bit. Anyway, in terms of the competition, it's obviously up against the newly upgraded Triumph Speed Twin 900, which has also spookily just had upside-down forks added along with a load of other upgrades, including electronics and things like that. The Triumph and the Moto Guzzi are kind of comparable in price. They've got similar performance and they've obviously both got very evocative badges. Other rivals might include the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650, which is a bike that I know very well. Now obviously it's down on power compared with the Moto Guzzi, but it's also a lot cheaper. Looking at the Royal Enfield range though, I think perhaps the bike this really does line up against is the Shotgun 650, for the fact that both the Moto Guzzi and the Shotgun have a bigger 18-inch front wheel, so they're perhaps a little more cruisery in nature. Now that's bad news for the V7 Sport, for the fact that the Shotgun is also pretty cheap at less than £7,000 for the starting price, but it also rides a lot better than the Interceptor for the fact that it's got proper suspension and decent tyres. The Shotgun is down on power a little bit and probably a bit heavier as well, but it's a very charming bike to ride. So, is the Moto Guzzi as good as the Triumph? Does it justify the extra money over the Royal Enfield? Let's find out. Right, so let's get to grips with this Moto Guzzi V7 Sport. A couple of things to clear up before we get underway. One, my terrible pronunciation of the colour. I think it's meant to be Verde Legnano, something like that anyway. And then also, when I said that the screen was TFT, it's not, it's quite clearly an LCD screen. So those two confusions cleared up. Let's go for a ride. And first impressions of the V7, because I've never ridden a V7 before. The only Guzzi I've ridden before is that V85. So I didn't know what to expect. I kind of had in my head it would be more like the Interceptor or the Triumph Speed Twin. Actually, when I said I thought it was going to be more like the Enfield Shotgun, that definitely rings true. It definitely feels more of a cruiser than a roadster. It's quite a low seat, quite a kind of laid back riding style. The front end feels quite a long way away, and it generally has a pretty kind of chilled riding position and kind of manners about it. So yeah, definitely a sense of Shotgun about it. That's the closest bike that I've ridden to how it feels. So, which is nice because I like the Shotgun and it was a more interesting bike to ride than I credited for its kind of cruiserish look. So that is no bad thing. And most of all, this is a bike dominated by its engine. As I say, I'm new to Guzzis, I'm not used to what they do, but the sound of that V-twin is absolutely fantastic. It's got such a kind of bassy kind of rumble to it and a real charismatic sound that just kind of, it kind of works from any revs. It kind of, when you, if you know, so I've got up to fourth here and oh, listen to that. So if you haul from low revs, it's got a great bark to it, and it's not a big revvy engine at all. It's a chugger rather than a screamer, but it, at any throttle input, it's just got bags of character. And riding it through this Italian landscape just feels absolutely perfect. So yes, you know, those kind of lazy cliches about Italian bikes being charismatic and operatic and all that kind of stuff definitely rings true. This Guzzi does have tons of character. And in terms of that power output, I was saying about how perhaps it's a little bit disappointing that Guzzi hadn't given it the more powerful engine from the V85. Well, yeah, I think it would be nice if there was a bit more shove, and you can definitely feel yourself kind of running out of revs on occasion. But there's plenty of torque, and that kind of character is what really stands out as the kind of dominant characteristic of the engine. And it gives it great flexibility. You can haul from low revs like I showed you before. You can run it out, and that's definitely, there's definitely a dose more performance than you get in the Enfields, that's for sure. And that's nice. And I think I was talking about how the Enfields are a lot cheaper. I think you feel like you're getting some extra value for money in both the character of the engine and its reach. So that's a definite plus. And in terms of the handling, it's definitely got that kind of big front wheel kind of physicality about it. You know, you need to kind of move around the bike, kind of muscle it into the turns a bit. And yeah, it definitely feels, like I say, more cruiser than roadster. But it's a really nice riding style. It's not the fastest, but it's just good fun, and when you combine it with the sound the engine's making, it's a kind of good times bike. But just, yeah, it puts a smile on your face. I don't know how much suspension travel there is at the back. It doesn't feel like there's a great deal, but there is some adjustment in the forks as well. And the handling feels, again, a level more sophisticated than some of those cheaper retros. And good enough for the power and performance that we have here. I'm appreciating there being a bit more on the brake lever, on the front brake, for these tight turns, because it's not a light bike, especially if you've got that big 21 litre fuel tank full up to the brim. It does take some stopping, but it doesn't disgrace itself in these twisty roads by any means. I've not ground the pegs out. Oh, there we go. I literally just said I've not ground the pegs out, and I just ground the peg out. So there we go. In tighter turns like that, it turns out you can ground the pegs out. But that's quite an extreme example. And I think I'd be interested to try one of the standard ones to see how they compare in terms of handling and kind of general character, but I do wonder if sport is a fair description for this bike. I don't think that's quite the terminology I would use for this bike. Let's just see what we're doing here. Right, back underway. And what was I saying? Yeah, I think the Triumph Speed Twins are possibly a little more on the sporty side of the kind of modern classic spectrum, but this certainly doesn't disgrace itself, and there's a really nice simplicity about it. You know, the switch cubes, there's no kind of faffing about, the displays are quite simple. It's a quite back to basics vibe, which is really quite endearing. If I'm being fussy, some of the finish around these little bolts on the fork crowns and things like that are a little bit cheap, but there's definitely, in general, the fit and finish is really good. I think certainly the equal of a Triumph, or maybe 90% of it, and a big step up over a Royal Enfield or something like that, as you'd kind of hope for the price. But really, this seems to me a bike that's about sensations and kind of character and mood, rather than kind of blood pumping acceleration and speed and all that kind of thing. It's a good times bike. In fact, I'd say there's a degree of kind of American vibe about it, but I guess you get that with the V-twin, even if it's the other way around from what you'd get on a big American V-twin. But there's certainly a sense of that kind of big American bike, the kind of cruiser-ish seating position, the lazy throb of that big V-twin. So it's a kind of beguiling mix of classic Guzzi Italian character, and then just a bit of something else about it that really stands out as a bit different. So there we go. A quick flavour of the Guzzi V7 Sport, and a bit of classic Italian flavour. So there we go, that's the end of the ride on the Moto Guzzi V7 Sport. As you can see, we got back after dark, so it's been quite a long day in the saddle. Really interesting one though. I've enjoyed the bike a lot. Now, having only ridden one Moto Guzzi before this, and only just kind of got to know the brand a little bit, I've been totally hooked by the kind of the charisma and the kind of sense of something a bit special about these bikes, which I can understand now why people get so passionate about them. And it's a bit of a cliche about Italian bikes that have got soul and character and all that kind of thing, but I think the V7 Sport really does have that. It's in the look of the bike, that unique engine layout. It's in the sound, which is absolutely amazing. I've got to say, for a modern bike, in a kind of world of kind of boring sounding parallel twins and all that kind of thing, how they've made this bike sound as good as they have, I really don't know, but that's really addictive. Just the sound, just when you're cruising through town, revving it out on the lanes, it's brilliant, great fun. So really, really impressed by that. Against the Triumph that I mentioned in the introduction, I think, for me, if it were my money, it's a similar cost up front. I think probably the Guzzi would edge it just for the character alone. Against the Royal Enfield shotgun, that's a slightly more difficult call because the shotgun is so much cheaper, but has a lot of the same kind of character and vibe about it. So I'd have to think carefully about that one. But yeah, there is something really, really special about this bike, and I've enjoyed riding it a lot. Should they have put the more powerful engine in? Well, it would have given it something a bit more to shout about, I think, and lived up more to the sport name. So it's perhaps something that would have been nice to have. I didn't feel like it was lacking in performance out on the road, fair to say. I think it's got the right amount of performance for the chassis, for the for the general road holding. It doesn't seem to be underpowered, but the 80 horsepower engine might have just given it a bit more something. Maybe that's something they'll do down the line. Let me know what you think in the comments about whether it should have had the more powerful engine or not. Anyway, that's it. They need to put the bikes away now. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure you hit like. If you're not subscribed already, please do so. And for now, I say goodbye. Thanks for watching and ride safe.